All right, we're live. Thanks everybody for joining us for the City of Courtenay City Council meeting for September 21st, 2020. I'd like to start just by acknowledging that we are meeting and zooming on the traditional unceded territories of the Comox First Nation. And we just have a preamble regarding COVID-19. Due to the coronavirus COVID-19 emergency, the City of Courtenay, with the authority of Ministerial Order M192, Local Government Meetings and Bylaw Processes, Order number 3, implemented changes to its open council meetings in the interest of public health and safety, and in accordance with Section 3.1 of Ministerial Order number 3, M192. In-person attendance by members of the public at council meetings will not be permitted until further notice. Council meetings are presided over by the mayor or acting mayor with electronic participation by council and staff via live web streaming. And with that, can we have the adoption of our September 8th meeting?
Adoption.
Second.
Excellent. Councillor Frisch, did somebody second that?
Sounded like Cole Hamilton.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. I see the thing. Are there any questions or comments regarding our September 8th minutes? Seeing no questions or comments, I'll assume that it passes unanimously, and we will move right into delegations. With this, I'm going to hand it over to Heidi Hartman from the regional director of BC Housing. Heidi.
Thank you, Mayor Wells, and I'm accompanied by Natalie Meredith from the John Howard Society. So she'll be doing the introduction, and I'll be following suit with an update from BC Housing's perspective on the junction and the Community Advisory Committee. So if I could turn it over to Natalie, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor Wells, Councillors Cole Hamilton, Frisch, Gillian, McCollum, Moran, and Theos. My name is Natalie Meredith, and I am a program manager with the John Howard Society of North Island, and I'm responsible for overseeing the operation of the junction. Thank you for having me here today to discuss the junction operations and how we've been working with community partners to help support the successful operation of the program. The Junction is a supportive housing program whose mandate is to house Comox Valley residents who have been experiencing chronic street and/or shelter homelessness. We utilize psychosocial interventions of harm reduction and safer practice, both of which are client-centered approaches that work with individuals where they're at. Staff are trained in trauma-informed practice and nonviolent intervention. Our goal is to support individuals to maintain housing over time. In order to work with the community and neighbors, we implemented a community advisory committee within 2 months of opening the junction. The purpose of the advisory committee is to provide a broad cross-section of the community with a mechanism to build and maintain positive relationships amongst the community, building operators, and program partners, to facilitate information sharing and dialogue, to identify and resolve any issues, opportunities, and concerns related to building operations, and to support the success of the supportive housing project. The current Community Advisory Committee membership includes 5 community members, which could be local residents, community organizations, businesses, neighboring residents, a representative from the John Howard Society of North Island, the RCMP Comox Valley Detachment, the City of Courtenay, BC Housing, Salvation Army, Kidcock Shelter, and the Comox Valley Recovery Center. We've met a total of 9 times since our first meeting on June 5th, 2019. As a committee, we have been responsive to a number of concerns and issues that have been brought forward. Resulting action items have included having junction residents engage in garbage and needle cleanup throughout the neighborhood. This included the rail corridor up to the old railway station, and this was ongoing up until the COVID-19 restrictions. We had created and distributed a who to call pamphlet for the neighbors. The City of Courtenay placed garbage containers along the walkway between the station and Sandpiper. The RCMP conducted a crime prevention through environmental design assessment of the neighborhood. Brush was cleared from along the rail corridor to mitigate urban campers and resulting garbage. The junction's covered smoking area, bike racks, and benches were moved away from the front of the property to help mitigate some of the noise challenges we'd been having. The junction also implemented a documented complaint process, and we conduct hourly nighttime walks throughout the building and grounds in order to be responsive to any noises that may be happening. Concerns that were brought forward from Kiwanis Village residents helped to inform our coordinated access and assessment committee's placement decisions. For example, we decreased intakes of individuals who had high behavioral and/or mental health needs. This was done to help mitigate some of the noise and concerns that people have been experiencing. Junction staff have also been reporting suspicious vehicles and individuals in the neighborhood to the RCMP. And unfortunately, I have been in the position of having to exit individuals from our program. These exits have been primarily due to aggressive or violent behavior or drug dealing. In addition to our Community Advisory Committee meetings, in December 2019, Heidi Hartman and Tori Cliff from the RCMP and I attended a meeting which was coordinated and facilitated by Chris Anderson and Pam Willis at the Kiwanis Village. This was for Kiwanis residents, where only those who'd been negatively impacted by the junction were given opportunity to speak or have their impact letters read. The victim impact statements previously read to council were the same or very similar to the ones we heard at this meeting. These concerns and others had also been brought forward to the advisory committee, which resulted in many of our action items. For me, these actions demonstrate we have been not only responsive, but we do really care about the neighborhood and the well-being of the Kiwanis Village residents and neighborhood members. I think it's also important to recognize that not everyone has negative feelings or experiences of the junction. I've received emails of support from a couple who live very close to us on Menzies. They frequently walk in the neighborhood, are not fearful, and have positive interactions with our residents. I've had regular conversations with a few women who live across the street from us. They specifically let me know that the concerns and views brought forward by the Kiwanis delegation and advocates are not necessarily shared by everyone at the Kiwanis Village. One woman did tell me the junction was noisy and even chaotic when we first opened, but she'd not had any issues for quite some time. These women interact with many of our residents. They've come over to look at our gardens, and they feel comfortable approaching me or any staff if they have concerns. A couple of our members of our Community Advisory Committee were holding regular sewing and mending bees at the junction. They were welcomed, treated respectfully, and asked back. At Christmas time, we had some school children and their parent and teacher supports deliver packages right into the junction through the Everyone Deserves a Smile campaign. And I do have to say that residents were very appreciative of the gesture and talked about the gifts and messages for quite a few days afterwards. So while the mandate of the Community Advisory Committee is to identify and resolve issues and concerns, it is also in place to identify opportunities to build and maintain positive relationships in the neighborhood, to facilitate information sharing and dialogue, and to support the success of the junction. I feel we have been responsive to concerns, but would also like to see energy put towards some of these other outcomes. We have committee members who are open to community engagement and capacity building, and this is the direction I'd like to see us moving in. In the spirit of this type of community capacity building, many members of the Community Advisory Committee have brainstormed a number of initiatives that might help to address concerns around safety and stigmatization of the junction. Some examples have included holding an information panel on mental health, housing first, and substance use, inviting neighbors into the junction for planned interactions such as crafts, tea, bingo, and forming a neighborhood watch in order to do regular neighborhood patrols. Our hope is to enlist community members who are ready to move forward in positive neighborhood building activities to help break down barriers and reduce stigmatization and help us to implement initiatives that are positive in capacity building. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and I do want to just really acknowledge, your guys' involvement in talking with the residents, when they did present to council, we did have the RCMP as well, who said, look, if you're speaking of all these issues, but we also need those to be called in because he said, in that same period, they might have received maybe one or two calls, whereas the impression was that things were happening really on a daily basis. And so I think through the outreach you guys are doing in that advisory group, it's really helping correct a lot of those perceptions. And in fact, when we spoke with Mr. Robertson this past week, that was one of the things we talked about was, how do you get ahead of that community building before, say, a place opens up, so that you can build that trust. And I think that's one of those challenges that we may still have to have a little bit of difficulty around, not just here, but across the province. But I think that really impressed with how you guys have really stepped up. So Heidi, did you want to add?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Wells. I just really wanted to reinforce that the community advisory committees are a new model for BC Housing. In the past, you may have heard that we had good neighbor agreements, and the agreement was signed and there wasn't necessarily the follow-up in due diligence. So we see the community advisory model, it replaces the good neighbor agreement. It's far more proactive and responsive because we have those regular meetings, and I have the opportunity to participate and hear firsthand what's working well so we can continue, and also what isn't working as well, so us as a community can work together toward a solution. So I did really want to emphasize, because I know there is a lot of information out there and people may wonder what happened to the good neighbor agreement. I do want to say that that is an opportunity that we have also presented to the community advisory committee, that if it's beneficial, we can supplement the work of the ongoing meetings with the good neighbor agreement. In some of our communities, including Nanaimo, one of the housing sites did move forward. They called it a neighborhood framework rather than a good neighbor agreement. So the CAC, or the Community Advisory Committee, is definitely open to doing more like that to supplement the ongoing work of the meetings. Thank you.
Excellent. And so does that kind of go through pretty much most of your presentation, Heidi and Natalie, on the agenda?
That's all I had to say. If anyone had any questions about the material that we've given or any questions at all, I'm happy to do my best to answer them.
You bet. We'll start with Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks to Heidi and Natalie for the presentation. I guess I just want to start by acknowledging my appreciation for you to come and share how things are going there, and for your acknowledging the issues, obviously, that you guys have had to deal with in the past. It's great to hear about the things that you've been able to resolve, and of course, it's great to hear that you're going to be watching this on an ongoing basis, which I'm not surprised at. I really appreciate that. And I just wanted to confirm. Obviously, we've had some interactions with the residents, and council's fairly aware of what's going on over there. And I guess we were also hoping to keep our finger on the pulse for the foreseeable future, just to make sure things are going as well as possible. And it sounds like you've allowed the city to maybe have two representatives if one of us was able to sit with you on that committee. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, we did discuss that as well too. So I'm absolutely open to that. We're relooking at our terms of reference. So I think we're rejigging some of the community or the membership piece. So yes, and I think it's absolutely helpful.
Yeah, I think it'll be really great. And I also understand that the board at the Kiwanis Village is also interested in having a seat, which I think would be also really helpful. So really appreciate that. And thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Excellent. And Councillor Theos.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Heidi and Natalie, for the presentation. One of the things is that in having conversations, not council related, but just conversations with people that are residents of the Kiwanis Village. There's been years of having other agencies, whether it's the shelter or the men's facility, in that same area, and this seems to be one more addition to add a level of discomfort to their lives, and that is what's expressed from the residents when they talk to me face to face. And I'm not going to discredit that at all, because again, these are people that worked all their lives to have a certain amount of freedom and feel that safety where they live. This is really critical, and for multiple reasons, they don't. And again, it's not just the junction. There's other facilities in that area, and truthfully, maybe having the junction in that area wasn't, in hindsight, wasn't the right spot, considering everything else that's in that area. It seems to be piled onto them, and it's hard to dispute that. So I take their concerns with great validity, and I'm glad to hear that you're working on addressing those, and it sounds to me that you're taking their concerns obviously very seriously. So thank you, Natalie and Heidi. We have to keep working on that, obviously, as a community, to ensure that the people living there feel that safety and security that they deserve in the Kiwanis Village, as all the other people that are in all the other facilities that need assistance too. My question to either of you two ladies would be in regards to where the residents are coming from. Have they been residents of the Comox Valley for over 5 years? Out of the 70 or so residents over the little over a year, I noticed that 6 have actually died, which caught caught me off guard. I was like, because nobody was over the age of 70, and I thought that was a high number, even being vulnerable people. I just thought, wow, and just over a year, that's significant, and it must be difficult to deal with. But where are these residents coming from? Are they coming from other parts of Vancouver Island? Are they coming from the Lower Mainland? Are they coming from here?
So the Coordinated Access and Assessment Committee, which is composed of a number of community organizations, helped to set the criteria for who would be eligible for this housing. And so I believe it in the documentation that I gave to you, our criteria was that they must be Comox Valley residents, and they needed to be chronically street and shelter homeless. So I believe for Comox Valley residents that we were saying they had to have lived here for at least 3 years. Sorry, I'd have to pull that documentation up. But we also made allowance for Aboriginal people who traditionally would sometimes move through this area and live in a number of communities. So we haven't been taking people from other parts of the province, nor have we been taking people really from outside of the Comox Valley. There are a number of people who have been living in the Comox Valley in tent cities, who have been chronically either street or shelter homeless, or have been living in really precarious housing situations. Unfortunately, a lot of these people have really compromised health situations, which has led to the junction being their final home. And I feel grateful that they were in a place where they were cared for, that we were able to bring in the supports they needed so that they could die with dignity, surrounded by family and people who cared for them. So I do my best, and as do the community partners, to ensure we are targeting Comox Valley residents.
Thank you very much, Natalie. I appreciate the answer.
If I might just add, this is Heidi. What is really resonated for me for the junction is I see the composition of individuals housed in our housing sites up and down the island. And it was very interesting to me that we have such a significant group. In fact, 62% of the residents at the junction are between 50 and 69, and that's significantly higher than what we see in other communities. I do want to emphasize Natalie's point. I know the number of 7 deaths over a year seems excessive, but we often do find that vulnerable people who have been homeless and on the street. We will see a significant number pass away once they move into housing and they get the supports they need. And they do have the opportunity to have a roof over their head and have those much needed supports in their last days of life.
Thanks, Heidi.
All right, and Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. And thanks very much, Natalie and Heidi, for the presentation. I did want to reference, there were about 10 items of material that you provided for us. And one of those was a pamphlet entitled Who to Call, which I understand you have handed out to all the people in the neighborhood. One of the things that was of the most significant concerns to me when we had the earlier presentation from Kiwanis was the expression that people were calling and not getting a response. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to what the response is when somebody does call, either raise a concern about noise or about some sort of activity involving what they perceive to be Junction residents that is impacting others in the neighborhood. I have another question after that, but if you could respond to that, please.
Certainly. So I implemented a documented process. So when we get a call into the junction, and that is the junction number that is in the pamphlet, staff have been directed to record the details of the information and how they've responded to it, what time and the date of the incident as well. If the person's willing to leave their name and phone number, we would also ask for that. The documented information that I have generally been about noise complaints, and staff have followed up, located where the noise is coming from, asked the person to turn down their music or intervened in a situation, and the residents typically comply. We haven't had any issues. And some of these noise complaints, I would like to point out, have been like at 6:30 in the evening, or they've been at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. So it's not necessarily all centered late at night. There have been sometimes, if we get a complaint that might be around activity on the tracks, that is something that staff would be less likely to intervene in. I would not be having staff go and interact with unknown people on the railroad tracks. So, you know, we'd either be suggesting to callers that they phone the RCMP if they're concerned that there's illegal activity, or staff may themselves go have a look, and if they deem that it's warrants an RCMP call, they would phone the police. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
I just want to assure that you're confident that everyone who does call with a concern does in fact get a response.
I wouldn't say I'm 100% confident, but I would like to think that I think staff are really good at documenting. And it's like any human thing. Sometimes stuff might get missed, but I think on the whole, they are documenting and they are responding. If it is within our building, they will go. And even if there isn't calls, if somebody's outside shouting and it's at nighttime, or even if it's during the day, our staff are trained to intervene and to de-escalate situations. And that's what we do. So we don't let people stand outside and scream for hours on end. As soon as we notice that there's elevated behavior, we're out there and we are interacting and responding to that.
Thanks. The other thing I wanted to ask about, as you probably know, I live within a few short blocks of the junction, and a couple of my neighbors actually serve on the community advisory group. I don't know if it's my imagination, but I do think there have been an increased number of sirens in the neighborhood over the last year and a half. And I wonder if it's related to the number of ambulance visits that you do have. I understand a lot of the residents do have significant medical conditions, and apart from the deaths, that you've also had other reasons for the ambulance to be called. Maybe you could just confirm that. And I don't know if there's a possibility of the ambulance turning its siren off when it gets cold, but that might give all of us a little bit of an added piece.
It would be nice if they could turn their siren off. I don't know if that's a request that we can make. I think it is true that there may have been an increase. I don't know what it was like before. we chart all of our incidents. So whether it's an RCMP call or whether it's a medical call for an ambulance, and I track those incident reports and I have to report out on them. There has been an increase in medical and ambulance calls, especially over the last few months, and there's been a decrease in police call outs. And it is because we do have some people who are quite ill, whether it's from, cancer or ongoing kidney, liver issues, there's a variety of things. And when we find residents who are needing medical attention, and our only option is to call 911 for ambulance. And we have had a lot of those lately, and I think it is largely because of the age group that we service and the significant health issues that some of our folks have.
Thanks for that. My final question is for Heidi. And Heidi, as Councillor Theos indicated, we've certainly asked a lot of this neighborhood with the number of facilities that are located within it. It is essentially a residential community. And we've had numerous conversations with you over the years with regards to the shelter, in addition to conversations about the junction. I just wonder if you could give us an update on the operations of the shelter during the pandemic, and what you're seeing, how the neighborhood is doing with the shelter these days in terms of feedback that you received.
Certainly. Thank you for the question, Councillor Hillier. Happy to answer. So the shelter operations has remained at status quo. Normally at the end of March, the extra shelter beds would have ceased, but due to the COVID pandemic, we did ask the provider to continue operating those beds. My understanding is that there have been no complaints about that. It's operating well, and that there hasn't been anything brought forward to us. Now, the Evergreen Shelter does have a good neighbor agreement, but they don't operate a community advisory committee, but they do participate in the one at the junction. And it's my understanding that if neighbors have concerns, they go directly to the shelter operator so they can be rectified.
Thanks very much. And I would just like to add to what other councillors have said in terms of thanking both of you for the work involved. I know it hasn't been easy, and particularly during the pandemic, but I hope we can continue to work together and provide this valuable service, as well as address any concerns for the safety and peace of the neighborhood. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, and I don't see any further questions or comments at this point, but yeah, just to reiterate, I think that, it's one of the things, I think, speaking on behalf of council, we're really happy to see how our community has been impacted over the last couple of years with Braidwood as well as the junction, and really trying to service those that need it the most, and really want to extend our appreciation for what you guys are doing and continue to do. You've been, I think, a really good partner, and we're right here ready to continue being a partner for further projects. So thanks so much for presenting today and being part of moving this forward. All right.
Thank you.
Heidi, did you want to respond, Heidi? I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, we really appreciated the opportunity to provide an update. And I think you'll see by the very comprehensive documentation that through the community advisory meetings, we've been responsive to community, and we have an extensive tracking system to record concerns that are being brought in.
Excellent, thanks. And Natalie, did you want to say anything, any last words?
No, other than thank you for having me.
All right. All right, thanks very much. And as a delegation, I'm going to assume that council approves them unanimously rather than call a vote. And we'll move on to 2700 Mission Road Properties. We got Rick Browning, Tim Orr, Tyler Thompson, and Maris McDonald.
Hi there. Hello. I'll share my screen here. Continue. Okay, everybody.
I can see it.
Okay, excellent. So thank you very much for listening to our presentation. We're hoping to make a compelling argument that it's a good opportunity to rezone this property for higher density housing from industrial. Oh. What's going on here? Hang on, technical difficulties.
All good. I call that job security, but
Great. Can you see, is my email up or is my presentation up?
your presentation still up, says 2700 Mission Road, and then there's sort of like 2.5 slides that I see.
Yeah. Hang on a second, sorry.
It's all good.
Quit. We should be professionals at this now. Preview. Share screen. Continue. Share.
All right, there we go. We can see it again.
Okay, enter full screen. All right. So, perfect. Okay, so our site's up in the Mission Heights area, up near the hospital, Home Depot, Thrifty Foods Junction there at Guthrie and Ryan Road. Our site location here, you can see it in the pink. It's within a 5-minute walk of Courtenay Elementary School, Comox Valley Hospital, within a 10-minute walk of Costco, Home Depot, the Comox Valley Aquatic Center, and North Island College. And then, of course, it's within a 15-minute walk of Thrifties and groceries. It's also on several major transit routes. It's also located within a 10-minute walk of one of the larger bus exchanges that we have in the valley. And then we also have, within a 5-minute walk, 3 bus stops, and then there'll be a future one likely at the site as well. It's also fairly connected through greenways and trail systems, which is quite nice for cyclists such as myself, getting to and from. So it's quite a walkable, bikeable, and transit operable community location. The site has several constraints. It's got, obviously, it's single family residential to the northeast and to the southwest. It's got industrial and mixed use to the south, and it's got constrained by ALR as well. And it also has a hydro right-of-way for the large transmission lines. Across the street, of course, there's future multifamily planned, and the cubes are also just being completed across kitty corner to it. And then, of course, we're looking to do the same across the street. Basically, it is a good location for this type of housing. It's kind of a nice node for the region. Our original site plan, this was for our pre-application public meeting submission. This was our kind of first kick at the cat, for example. So we had kind of 38 unit family apartment building, 84 studio units and 1-bedroom apartments, and then townhomes along the site. For the pre-application, the public meeting comments were that traffic was a concern, parking, density, and building height. So we kind of reacted to that and shifted the site quite a bit. One of the major concerns was the fact that we were putting a 3-story apartment building adjacent to the single family residential. So what we shifted them around basically is we put these 2-story townhomes adjacent to the single family residential. And we made sure there was a significant setback for any 3-story building, so that both the apartment buildings were pushed back as far as we possibly could on the site from the single family. So then we did a public mail out, and the comments that came back were traffic, unit matrix was a big one, and density again. You can see here we've got the kind of 2-story townhouse in scale with the single family, and then the 3-story apartment buildings. And then our final rezoning submission, we reacted to that unit matrix more than anything, along with hiring Bunt Engineering to do a kind of fully detailed traffic report. And we changed the unit matrix in the larger apartment building. So what we ended up doing is the townhomes, we had the 2-bedroom townhomes, those didn't change too much, but we did inset them slightly. So the plan is to lower them almost a story so that they're only representing about a story in height, kind of in relation to the single family adjacent. In the 72 unit rental building, we changed the matrix from being studios and 1 bedrooms to more 3 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. So at the moment, there's 12 3-bedroom apartments, which are at premium in the valley. There's not a lot of them. And then several 2-bedroom units. And also, obviously, there's about a 60-meter plus setback between them and the single family there. And then the 37 unit rental building, this is also geared towards families. So it's quite a few 2 bedrooms and several 3 bedrooms as well. And then in terms of site and amenities, basically we're trying to provide 2 playgrounds for the space, community garden areas, several bike parking locations, including in the buildings, and each townhouse would have an individual locker associated with their carport. All the townhomes would be EV ready, and also there would be 10 stalls dedicated to EV with meters on them for the community. The trail connection to the north to ensure that the trail that is there currently is maintained. The retention of the larger trees to the northeastern corner there. And then of course the kind of community infrastructure improvements, including curb gutter, new bus stop, and any of the other things kind of mandated by the city. So if there are any questions, we also have the owners here as well, and also Tyler Thompson from Bunt Engineering for any traffic related questions.
Thanks very much. And I got one quick question. Because you mentioned how you have the single families, houses that are already there, I guess those are the white ones in the background. Are those by and large single story homes, or are they 2-story homes?
It's a mix. There's 2 stories and there's single story homes there.
Okay. All right. Thanks. With that, Councilor McCollum.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the presentation. I think there's a lot of good adaptations that came through on this final application, and it was nice to see in our agenda package a lot of the concerns that are outlined in some of the community feedback already addressed. So I just want to commend that proactive approach on this. I know it's relatively a pretty big proposal for the area, but I think it fits well with the size of the parcel. I also like that the townhouses are situated in a way that they're not overlooking those houses that currently don't have any residences behind them. I think that's a great adjustment. One of the feedback issues that I did read was that there was concern from the neighborhood that it was too many rentals, and that they would like to see a mixture of home ownership and rental units. And I'm just wondering what the thoughts are around that, if it's going to be dedicated rental, or if it's a mix, and if that is something that could be adjusted as this process moves forward.
Yeah, definitely. Tim, do you want to comment to that?
Currently, we have the 2 3-story parcels are all subject to be market rental units, and then the 28 townhomes would be stratified for ownership currently. We have no plans to change more units into strata. We feel that there's still a need for rental in Courtenay, and that is so far the plan to move forward.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that clarification. I was happy to see the change of more 2 and 3 bedroom apartments, because I think there is a need, and that it will impact the demographic more towards families. And I think that is something that the neighborhood would like to see. So yeah, thanks for that.
Just on another comment, we're also looking at revising some of the 2-bedroom townhomes into 3-bedroom townhomes, just kind of changing that mix, prior to DP as well a little bit. But
that's great.
We are definitely looking at gearing this towards more of a family mix.
Great, thank you.
Excellent. And Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the presentation. I actually had an opportunity to walk the site earlier today. I didn't see any signs up telling me not to, so I accessed it from Mission Road, and walk down the trail and then up the existing path to join with the walkway that goes behind Cascara. So it looks like there's a trail network there that you're joining into. And I did notice that there's a bit of a slope already existing behind the houses on Cascara, but you're actually going to lower that grade further. Could you speak a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, so when you walk the site, basically there is a kind of a little plateau, and then there's a slope down towards the hydro right away at this point. That plateau is actually at about, I believe it's about 89 meters, and that's the elevation of the first floor of the apartment buildings. But that then goes up, and there's about a 3 to 4 meter rise up to the Cascara residence right now. So we're planning on basically putting in some sort of retaining structure and keeping the townhomes at a similar height, around 85 to or 89.5 to 90 meters as a finished floor elevation for the first floor of the townhomes.
Okay, and as with Councillor McCollum said, I was very pleased to see the responses that you had made, changing your site plan quite significantly based on feedback from the community, and retention of those mature trees in the far corner, I think is a real plus. I noticed that there are other trees throughout the property, including some fruit trees. Are they likely to go, or are there any of them that possibly be retained?
I can only hear about 2 out of every 5 words.
Oh, sorry about that. I noticed that
Sorry.
Mature fruit trees on other parts of the site, and I'm just wondering if there's any possibility that some of them can be retained along with the large stand in the far corner of the property.
Were you able to hear that?
We haven't marked some. I did hear basically the question was basically if we can retain some of the mature fruit trees. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. I think several of them are marked on our site plan. I'm not sure if they are able to be retained yet, but there is a fairly extensive replanting strategy for the site through the landscape plan. So I think that there will be an opportunity to maybe bring some of those back, and especially in the community garden area. We actually have quite a lot of green space on this site to work with. So that's quite a possibility.
Okay, and I will have a number of other questions for our staff when this comes up later on our agenda, but I did want to ask you about the power lines, and you have that corridor through the front of the property. I don't know if there's any possibility of that being buried, but I'm just wondering what that does to the kind of image of the property if you've got residents living in that sort of proximity to hydro lines.
The proximity of the hydro lines, we did talk to an electrical engineer about that, and hydro, there doesn't seem to be any kind of scientific evidence that they're, harmful or anything like that. There's all sorts of rules that hydro mandates about buildings and cladding and all of that. Some of these will have to be grounded just if you're using metal cladding and stuff like that, but it's all kind of designed through engineering.
Okay, thanks very much.
Excellent. And Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I guess I'll echo the comments by Councillors Hillian and McCollum. I was very pleased to see the evolution of the project in response to concerns in the community, and particularly I thought the changes in siting and the use of the grade to ensure that, as far as I can see, that people won't really be overlooked at all by these buildings, nor will they tend to get in the way of people's views, which is often a concern. So I think, yeah, the arrangement was really quite optimal for the site. Some of the concerns that did come up were, that came up relatively frequently, was visitor parking. And I noticed that this building exceeds the parking requirements set out by the city. So I'm assuming that visitor parking is accounted for there. And maybe in a second, you could let us know about that. And some of the concerns were about traffic. And of course, some of the ways you can deal with traffic are by giving people options other than driving a car to get to where they're going. And site placement is obviously great for that in terms of the number of places one can access quite easily on foot. And I had a question about two other modes of transport. One was cycling. I noticed that for the I don't know how to describe it, the apartment building that's closest to the corner, sort of in the corner, that there were outdoor bike racks, which is certainly a great start. I was wondering if there had any possibility of consideration of like a bike room or a bike building just for security of bikes and to allow e-bikes to be charged and to be out of the elements. And I guess then I have one further question. There was also discussion of a possible bus stop. And I was wondering if you could let us know whether that's a current plan or that's something that might occur during the evolution of the project. And that's 3 questions, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
So let's start back. So the bike parking, there is covered bike parking in the larger building. There's basically a basement story that will have storage and bike lockers, and I'm sure we could make provisions for electric bike charging. The parking, we do meet the bylaw requirement of 1.5 per unit. I do think that this site probably won't see that parking load. I think that because of its proximity to the major bus exchange and the walkability to kind of all the major kind of points for a community, like the community, the aquatic center, Thrifties, I think that people will tend to walk and ride a bike. And then the last question was the bus stop, is that right?
Right, where you had to provide a moment.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks.
And the bus stop is in our current plan. It's part of the engineering report that we have to basically improve the bike lane and add a bus stop at the corner.
And there was a question as to which side of the corner it should be. And I think you said in the report that to the north side of the corner would make sense if the frequency of buses were to increase. Or is it currently planned for south or north of the road leading on the access road leading onto VMP?
Right now it's 6 meters in on Veterans Memorial. It's 6 meters onto the site from Mission Road, if that makes sense.
So if I could just,
so on the south then rather than the north.
Yeah.
So it's just to the north of Mission Road. And one of the reasons it was actually just recently moved to that location from just the south side of the access. And the reason being to help maintain visibility between drivers leaving the site access there and having clear sight lines. But also it's closer proximity to routes that are traveling in other directions and closer to the crosswalk so that pedestrians have easy access to and from the different routes around that corner.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. I'll probably have questions later, but I'll leave it to others for now. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And next we have Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks, guys, for the presentation. I just wanted to follow up on one of those last questions about parking, and like Councillor Cole-Hamilton mentioned, a lot of these concerns about the increase in traffic are fairly legitimate, and one of the ways that we're trying to curb that, obviously, is by providing those alternate forms of transportation. So can you just summarize again for me? You said there was 1.5 vehicle parking spots per unit, is that right?
That's correct. That's the bylaw.
Okay, and then for bicycle parking, have you guys kind of worked it out? I know in those townhomes, you said there was sort of one spot in the carport. Is that right for each unit?
No, what we've designed, basically I've designed a small kind of storage kind of garage space locker in the carports for about 4 bicycles. So
that's great.
If a family were to move into one of these units, there's enough room to kind of hang up your bicycle. And, a 110-volt receptacle could be located in there for e-bikes, because I know that they're becoming more and more popular in this valley. And then the apartment building, there's room for quite a few bike stalls. We haven't actually done the math on it. And then there's various bike stall outdoor locations on the site. But
right, and
a total count hasn't been done yet.
Yeah, and I think those outdoor locations are important for visitors and those who are coming and going, from their own units quickly. But I think those inside ones are going to be really important. And I'll just reiterate that what you know already is that e-bikes are going to be very popular coming up. So that having those receptacles in great and proper locations are going to be really important. So do you have any idea of how many bike sort of parking places inside you're going to have per unit? Or what you could accommodate? Like, could you accommodate 2 or 3 per unit? Do you have that kind of space?
Likely. We basically, half the building has a basement at this point, and because storage also is an issue in apartment buildings, there's plans that everybody, there might be half the storage lockers there or something like that. But the space hasn't been totally designed yet. But I mean, my wife just bought us an e-bike, and it's like twice the size of a regular bike. It's got a cargo bike, so you can't hang that thing from the wall. So I understand the constraint, the size constraints that you might need to accommodate for an electric bike, especially for families, right? The trailer comes with them, the bike comes with them as well. So
well, I appreciate that level of understanding. So I'll follow up later if I have any more questions. Thanks.
Excellent. And Councillor Theos.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and I do like the fact that there is more 2 and 3 bedroom units. I think there was quite a few micro and studio units in the community already over the last year or so, as in terms of projects moving forward. So 2 and 3 bedrooms, I do believe are meeting a demand, and of course the market will say whether we have this much demand as in terms of what's coming in front of us recently. But what I do look at when I see the project, and maybe there's other elements to it, but this is a lot of people that are going to be living in a relatively small space. I know it's not a 20-story high-rise, but it does pack a similar amount of capacity of people to some degree. And I'm looking around, and I know there's going to be playgrounds, but and a community garden. But I'm wondering to myself, is there an element of any kind of green, any kind of yard area there for people to assemble in and to or is it just a bunch of concrete and lay out these homes? To be honest with you, if I'm being honest, it looks like a military housing that I've seen recently. When I travel around the country, I see communities that are actually coming up with some vibrant looking buildings, and they look different and attractive. And this reminds me of the olden days when I grew up in Vancouver and they were all row housing, but maybe that's part of the model, but I'm just wondering, where's the green?
There's quite obviously this is a fairly white rendered scene here. I mean, it's more of a quick AXO for the rezoning application, but there is a fairly extensive landscape plan, likely referenced in the staff report, and there is a lot of green area on this site, even though it's just rendered as white space at this moment.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and then we are developing the architecture of these buildings more. This was kind of getting, this is a fairly Nordic modern look at the moment, but we do plan on, during development permit process to work on the tectonics of these buildings to make it a vibrant community.
Thank you, Maris.
All right, thanks. And next we have Councillor Morin.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me okay? Because I turned my volume down earlier.
You are coming through loud and clear.
Oh, perfect. Great. Thank you very much for the presentation. And like others have said, I'm really happy to see some of the adjustments. I'm actually really happy to see the mix of buildings, and you're one of the first proposals that's come forward, I think, that has that below market rental aspect, which I'm really happy to see, because we know with the recent housing assessment, that is where we really need some units there. So one of my questions is just curiosity around how that partnership with BC Housing came to fruition, because I think that's something that we would love to see other developers, take advantage of. So that's a question in a moment. And yeah, just I guess in terms of the diversity of the units, I think that makes a good neighborhood, because I don't know if you were around for the earlier presentation, but when you have all sort of one type of, I guess, folks in the neighborhood, there can be that aspect of just putting stress on a neighborhood in that way. And I really like how there's the mix with the single family homes as well. Kind of adding to what Councillor Theo said, of course, I'm thrilled about the community garden piece. Is there any other area is there enough room in that community garden area for kind of a gathering place for everyone that lives there, like in terms of if there was a neighborhood barbecue or anything like that? So I guess those were a couple questions. Just, is there space for something like that? And I guess in terms of kind of reaching out to the neighborhood, I know you've done that through your info sessions, but I think that that's a really important aspect when people don't, it's kind of fear of the unknown in a way, or fear of change, and and I think people often don't realize the benefits that this kind of a development can bring. So yeah, so just a question around that collaboration piece, how that came about, and then the question about kind of more of a neighborhood gathering spot. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you see my mouse on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, there's quite a generous area in this zone for a community gathering. Basically, this is where we put the playground and the kind of community gardens. And that's how we see this. One of the comments from one of the neighbors is basically, oh yeah, like finally a playground's coming to this neighborhood, because there's no playground nearby. The closest one's down at the, Crown Owl, basically. So there is this is kind of a dynamic bit of design for development permit that's community oriented. Not fully designed yet, but that's kind of the placeholder for it. And I think a playground in this neighborhood is going to be pretty busy. So, and then of course the kind of eyes on the street. So you kind of bring more. You kind of bring more of that community infrastructure around it. So the community garden, maybe there's like, the natural play area between the woods and the trail as well that starts to develop. So.
Yeah, and I like how the playground is being buffered there. There was another development in another part of town where it was interesting. The townhouses had big high fences around them, and then the playground had like two foot kind of facade fences that was open to a really busy corner. So I like how there's a bit of protection there.
We also, it's important that you don't build a huge wall in front of people. The more you kind of open up, obviously you need some private space for a townhome as well. But the Jane Jacobs had a very famous line: "The eyes on the street," right? Like the eyes on the street are very important to make sure community feels safe as well. So to have some overlook of the townhomes, which are a little bit more ground oriented, obviously, really helps to make that playground kind of a place where you could let your kids go, right? And you don't necessarily need to be there in the community obviously after a certain age. But
and the piece about the collaboration with BC Housing, did you speak to that?
I'll let Rick talk to that.
It's going to seem very, very unsophisticated, but I had heard through my network that Housing Corp was looking for an opportunity in Courtenay, and I simply picked up the phone and asked for a meeting. And through that meeting process, they did have a need, and they had a number of needs, but this location they were aware of, and they thought it was ideal, and they said simply, let's do it. So I know that sounds awfully simple, but that's really what transpired.
Well, thank you for picking up the phone, because not everybody even starts with that. So thanks.
Thank you.
Excellent. And Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to pick up on something I was reading in the report, which is that I read that you were aiming for, on the step code, for aiming for level 3. And I was just wondering just what that means in terms of aiming for it. Is that a place that you plan to get to, or how certain is that that kind of target for this development?
It's fairly set in stone because I believe your building department's going to mandate it for the building permit by the time it gets there. So the 37 unit family apartment has to be step 3. The 72 at this point, I believe needs to be step 2, but I believe by the time we get to building permit for it, it'll be step 3. So our goal, and we've achieved it on many other projects, is to hit step 3 for these projects. It's not that onerous, and it's a good target to achieve, and it also reduces kind of the overall, well, it increases the efficiency of the building from an energy perspective.
Great, I'm really pleased to hear that. Thanks for elaborating.
And Councillor Frisch.
Back to me already. Okay, great. Well, there were a few other things, and I've even picked up on some more. So the first thing I was going to ask about was, again, it's about parking. And of course, unfortunately, this is the reality we live in, is a large amount of your site is going to be parking. Is that all asphalt?
No, it's a mix. So we also have to mitigate stormwater management on this site. And because we have such a large site, obviously there's, again, you can see my mouse here. There's faint blue line along here is the hydro right away. So it actually makes for a perfect location to put parking because we can't build anything high underneath those lines. But they also kind of mandate kind of lower plantings, but also the more impervious surface we put there, we're trying to mitigate all our storm management within that parking lot area. So there will be quite a few bioswales and such like there.
You are going to have something like bioswales, and
absolutely.
Well, they're great because that's what I was kind of hoping to hear. That's would that be considered something progressive at this point? I mean, I haven't seen it very much on developments, but how certain are you of how much water those will be able to hold versus our typical storms?
We're certain it'll take care of the don't quote the 25-year flood, whatever the city's civil mandate. We've already had a civil engineer look at that and make sure that we can achieve it with the groundwater infiltration. You know, the whole progressive nature of that, it's funny, it's such an easy thing to do. And it's, at the same time, it's a cheap thing to do too, and it can be done so well. So I don't know why it seems to be a progressive technology, because it's kind of it's the basics, right?
Well, very interesting. And more about parking. How are those 1.5 parking spots per unit going to be distributed? And the reason I ask is, you know, if we associate a cost to those parking spots, sometimes it makes people rethink, you know, the true cost of driving their car around. Is it just every unit gets one, or is it every unit gets to choose if they want more than one, or how does that work?
Oh, I'm not sure how I mean, there will be, basically every building will have enough to have the 0.5, one stall per unit plus the 0.5 visitor. The relationship of who gets the stall is up for the kind of building operator at that point. But it'd be nice to see, I mean, just on another note, it'd be nice to see if the bylaw could go down eventually, and so that you don't have to require so much parking. Obviously, you still need visitor parking and all of that, but I do think that 1.5 stalls per unit in this day and age for a higher density development is a little too high. But
we'll see where our OCP takes us later this year. And then I had a question about you said there was outdoor bike parking. Did you say that was covered? I don't know if that was in the report or not.
No, it's not at this point, although there's likely going to be a canopy at the front entrance, which would have some covered bike parking of both larger buildings. Mm-hmm. And that's it for now, though. Yeah.
Yes, that's such an incentive if people get to park their bike really close to the front entrance, and of course it's dry when they come back out. I also had a question about recycling and soon to happen in the valley food waste collection. Have you guys thought about that? And I think I don't even know how you would deal with food waste in a building that size. Have you guys given any consideration to those two things?
Tim might be able to speak to that. He's done several developments in Vancouver that deal with green bin issues.
Sorry, I was on mute there. There's many ways to, we obviously have space for it. The green waste is always a little bit tricky as you get into higher density, but it's easily done. We provide in every rental apartment that we have, everyone gets a small compost bin, and then there's a green recycling compost bin that it can be deposited in, and then you can do frequent. It's all obviously managed through your waste pickup management company, and depending on how many times a week it needs to come, it gets picked up, so it's not attracting raccoons and seasonal animals, but it's easily managed.
Maybe I'll take this opportunity to ask about something, just an idea off the top of my head. Has anyone refrigerated their garbage room to make it cold enough that things don't break down as quickly? Would that be too expensive?
And they have recently started doing that in the city, and the cost of it, you can imagine, it throws off the energy modeling substantially when you have a large freezer cooling down the room. Not to say that it can't be done for this site, it's not likely, but it's starting to happen.
Yeah, it was just more of a tangent. Thanks for the answer. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, guys.
Excellent. And Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. Can people hear me okay?
Yep.
Yep.
I do have a couple of questions for Tyler, given that you're part of the presentation in relation to the traffic study. I think a lot of the people in the neighborhood and the surrounding areas are concerned about how busy that area already is. And of course, they all experienced the building of the hospital and the challenges with parking that took place at that time, the very busy intersections in that area. So you've done a traffic study, and you've basically indicated that the capacity is there to deal with this development and presumably the one across the street on the other corner of Lerwick and Mission. Could you speak a little bit about the perception of how busy that is, and how the average person has a hard time understanding that if we put this many new places in new cars, it won't just continue to get busier and busier to the point that it will be hard to manage?
Sure. So yeah, thank you very much for the question. I do agree. I think it comes down to perception. A certain amount of vehicle traffic might seem like a lot to one person and not to another. So everybody's a little bit subjective on that as well. If you look at downtown Victoria or downtown Vancouver, the amount of traffic that you're seeing at these intersections, people won't blink an eye at, but it's obviously a different context, a different location, and people are perceptive to what they see on a daily basis as well. So the reality is we've analyzed the intersection for the existing condition. We've added extra traffic beyond that assumed for this development, as well as the recently opened hospital, and as well as the developments that are just going up around the area for the next 15 years. So we've projected all the way into the future as best we can what traffic could be on the road network, and the amount of capacity that was, built when this intersection was originally built took that into account. When we look at our development specifically, the easiest way to break it down, there's industry standards for vehicle trip generation rates, and we've used those to project what each part of the development is expected to generate. I think the highest period was in the afternoon peak period, and we're looking at about 67 vehicle trips in 1 hour. So you look at it at 1 hour, okay, what does that mean? You break it down by minute, and at each of the two access points, Onto Veterans, you're looking at about one new vehicle every 1 to 2 minutes. So if you stood there at that driveway and waited for 1 or 2 minutes, you might see one vehicle come in or out. And then on the access over on Mission, it's about one vehicle every, sorry, it's the other way around. One vehicle every 3 to 4 minutes at Veterans, and one vehicle every 1 to 2 minutes over at Mission. So when you start to break it down into those kind of numbers, and look at the infrastructure at the adjacent intersection, it was built to handle even more traffic than we're projecting well into the future. So from a traffic capacity perspective, this is quite low on the Richter scale for me, in terms of, equating to any kind of pressure on the network.
What about at the intersection of Madrona and Mission, where the if this is built, the main access off Mission will be? What sort of problems are potentially going to be addressed there? Some of the residents I've met with are concerned about left turns coming off Mission into the development. The fact that there's a number of businesses, including a dance school on Madrona, that at busy times we end up with a fair amount of on-street parking on Mission. Some of those types of issues. Have you had any chance to think about those?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, breaking it down to the fact that we're able to distribute traffic quite well across the site with 2 access points. So it will be the main access off of Mission. One thing that the city had asked us to do was look at sight lines. So ensuring that in terms of safety, vehicles leaving and entering at that access, they're able to see all the way down to the intersection without issue, even taking into consideration parking on street. The development itself is providing enough parking to ensure that they're not adding additional parking pressures onto the network. So that's a good thing. And it's probably, again, to reiterate, more parking than we actually need for the development, but at least it will make sure that nobody will be parking on the street from the development itself. And sure, at certain times of day, it's going to be a little bit busier than other times, and that may coincide with when things are busy in the adjacent area. But I think that's true of any residential neighborhood that's adjacent to other mixed uses.
Thanks. And in your future traffic conditions assessments, you did mention one issue that you saw as problematic. I think it was, I can't find it exactly here, but I believe it was on page 68 of our 109-page report related to this. Do you recall the one I'm talking about?
I don't have that report in front of me just now, but was it with regards to the restricting the access on veterans? No,
it was related to Mission, I believe. And,
okay. Sorry, no, I'm not.
I'll tell you what, I'll find it later and I'll bring it up when we deal with this on the agenda when we speak to our staff. Any issues with stacking related to Mission Road, people turning off veterans onto Mission and then being backed up while they make left turns into this development?
No, so we didn't see any, when we analyzed the queuing for the site, we didn't see anything backing up anywhere near to our driveway, even with our added traffic onto that. So the concern would be, I guess, for, I guess it would be westbound left turning vehicles at Veterans. And we didn't observe any queues backing up far enough to be an issue for people to get in and out of Madrona.
Okay, thanks very much for that. If I could just have one more question, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to come back to you, Maris. I've been on council for 11 years now, and in my early days, I met with a fellow who was a developer, and he wanted to let me know that developers were people too. there's a certain image that people in the community have that property developers tend to want to maximize the money they can get out of a site regardless of what the impact is. But in those 11 years, you're the first person I've heard make reference to Jane Jacobs, who, as some people may not be aware, is the was an author and journalist who was the pioneer in urban renewal and livable cities. And I just wondered if you could speak about your philosophy as a person who develops property and what type of an impact you're trying to make here, while obviously you're interested in making a living for yourself and your investors.
Well, for one, I'm not a developer. I'm the architect hired by the developer. But you know, Jane Jacobs' philosophy has really guided me into the architecture profession. I started in urban planning, and a lot of her writings basically started to steer me into that. And then, you know, going into developing, working with developers on land parcels, it's not necessarily maximizing, you know, the number of units. Obviously, there's a balance that you have to achieve, right? You could develop this site a lot denser, you know, by going higher and, you know, putting in underground infrastructure and all of that, but it's not necessarily going to benefit the developer or the community. I think that there's always a balance, and sometimes that's a conversation you have to have pretty early on with the developer and make sure you're in line. And in our case, our values were aligned. And I grew up with Tim in Vancouver as well. So our paths crossed on this project quite well, I think.
Okay, thanks very much.
Excellent. I think that answers most of the questions. It did sound like there may be a puppy somewhere around that is looking for some attention as well, but I think we've had a really fulsome discussion. Really want to appreciate you guys answering all the questions, giving us the presentation or where your thought process and the development of this from beginning to where we are today. So having said that, again, I'll just assume that council will receives this unanimously, and we'll move on to staff reports and presentations. And if somebody would like to move the 5th Street AAP, that'd be great.
Move receipt.
Second.
Mr. Mayor, I think you're looking for the recommendation, are you?
Well, if we want to move receipt so there can be some discussion before we move the recommendation.
I'm happy to.
Yeah.
I'm happy to move the recommendation if you want to just jump to it.
Sure.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So I'll move that based on the September 21st staff report entitled 2020 5th Street Bridge Rehabilitation Alternative Approval Process. Council seek the approval of the electors for the 5th Street Bridge Rehab Loan Authorization Bylaw number 2978-2020 through the alternative approval process, and that council establish elector response forms as attached in this report, and that council determine 20,162 as the total number of electors to which the approval process applies, and that council establish the deadline for receiving responses for the AAP as November 16th, 2020 at 4:30.
Second.
Okay, and Ms. Richta, you were able to capture the mover and seconder there fine, I assume. And with that, let's pass it over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor. With that, I'll turn it over to our corporate officer, Wendy Sarista, who authored the report and can summarize it and take any questions that council may have. Wendy?
Thank you. Through the interim CAO to Mayor and Council, today's staff report outlines the next phase of the long-term borrowing process for construction of the 5th Street Bridge Rehabilitation Project. Loan authorization bylaw has received 3 readings and approval from the Inspector of Municipalities. As required under the Community Charter, the next step in borrowing is to attain elector approval through the alternate approval process or referendum. And conducting an AAP is less costly than a referendum and allows electors to submit responses over a period lasting 30 days. Staff is recommending the AAP process, which was approved by Council on April 20th, and I'll take any questions.
right, are there any questions by council? I don't see
I
anybody.
couldn't, sorry, I couldn't find my hand, but I'm giving you my other hand, the real one.
All right, Councillor Frisch, go right ahead.
I just wanted to make sure I saw that these are available at City Hall, but I assume they're also available on our website.
Yes, thank you for the question. We will be preparing a robust communications plan so that we can make the forms available online as well for submission to City Hall. But a FAQ will be forthcoming to discuss that plan.
Thank you very much.
All right. I don't see any other hands waving in any shape or form. So I want to thank staff for bringing the report forward. And I think we're ready to call the vote. So I'll poll council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
In favor.
And I'm in favor as well. So that's unanimous. Thanks everybody for all the work on that. I'd like to say that's the easy part, but I know we got a lot ahead of us and really want to appreciate everybody as we move forward. Next on the development services, we have OCP.
Excuse me, Mayor, do we have a subsequent recommendation related to the bylaw itself?
Ms. Schritzler, was there a subsequent that we need to contemplate?
No, thank you, Mayor. Not at this juncture. We need to satisfy the electoral approval process first, and then we will be bringing a report back to council following the outcome of those results.
Excellent.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at this report from April 20th that was part of the background material. My apologies.
It's all good. Better to check twice and than not. So that's totally fine. But yeah, if somebody would like to move the official city plan neighborhood consultation in phase 3.
I can do that, Mayor. I'll move that based on today's staff report, official community plan neighborhood consultation in phase 3, council approve option 1 and direct staff to undertake neighborhood consultation through a hybrid method, a combination of neighborhood walking tours and virtual workshops.
I'll second that.
Excellent. And we'll pass that over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor. In turn, I will pass this over to Mr. Ian Buck, our Director of Development Services, to summarize the report and take any questions that council may have.
Great. Thanks very much through the interim CAO and Mayor to council. I also have with me today Tat Seta, the Manager of Community and Sustainability Planning, as well as Nancy Gothard, our Senior Policy Planner. And if necessary, we can get them to assist us here. We've reached the stage with our OCP where we're engaging the neighborhoods. And really what we're looking at here is the neighborhoods where the greatest amount of growth is intended to be focused through our modeling. Obviously, COVID's put a wrench in all of our engagement since our Ideas Fair in February. And we're exploring different options in terms of how to engage given the restrictions. We do recognize that things are evolving as we head into the fall with COVID, and we will adjust as necessary. But at this point in time, we're proposing that we do a hybrid model of engagement, and that would include what we're referring to as walk shops, so walkabouts in neighborhoods with small groups of people that would sign up ahead of time. The idea there would be within that small group, we could get the real feeling from the residents of what sort of issues they face, what they like in their neighborhoods, what they'd like to see to change, as well as discuss at a very high level some of the policy options. Following those walkabouts, we would do virtual workshops with the neighborhoods. We're contemplating doing 2 of them. So a workshop that would be available for people who weren't able to or weren't comfortable participating in the walkabouts. And then followed up with a larger virtual workshop where we dive deeper into the policy areas and the form and character guidelines. That's the recommended model. We also have contemplated just doing it as virtual workshops, which would be conducted by our consulting team. And just stepping back a second, the neighborhood walkabouts would be conducted by staff, and then we'd have the consulting team assist us with the virtual workshops. So the second option, and this is still available even if things don't things progress with COVID and don't go well into the fall, we would just turn to the virtual workshops only. And as presented in the report, it's really engagement through a workshop scenario online. Staff, and if you haven't had a chance, either didn't participate, and I'm not sure, maybe I shouldn't say this if they're posted online yet, but I've watched some of the videos that Tats and Nancy and the consulting team did with Zoom webinars towards the end of July brainstorming sessions. And it went very well. Staff are comfortable with the format. We were able to use breakout rooms. So we're confident that either of these methods will be successful going in. But just wanted to gain council's support for the preferred approach here. And happy to take any questions or deflect them to staff if necessary. Thanks.
All right, thanks very much. And we do have a few questions, starting with Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Ian and staff, for all your hard work. Really happy to see that Plan B is as robust as it is, and that's good, just in case something does come up and we can't do that preferred option, which I'm very happy to support, by the way. I had a question about the walk shops or the walkabouts and council's involvement. Is there an opportunity to join those and hear what people are saying?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think we can absolutely work with that. We still want to get a sense of how many people are going to show up. Hearing gets difficult when you get in larger groups and you're walking through a neighborhood, social distancing, and trying to sort out where we're going to stop for small discussions. But depending how many people we have signed up, I don't see any issues with having council attend.
And you're considering, was it 8 walkabouts?
Yeah, at the moment we're looking at 8. That's what we had contemplated earlier. We may expand that a little bit and just use only staff resources instead of the consultant resources who have committed to 8. We're still just in the process of refining those neighborhoods, but that's roughly what we're looking at is 8.
Yeah, and do you have any idea of, I guess you'd take people from one particular neighborhood and you tour around that neighborhood. You wouldn't necessarily expect people to come from all over the city to go all over the city and so on and so forth.
That's correct. It would be neighborhood specific.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully there's so much interest that we do need a few more. So I guess I'm hopeful for that, but yeah, it looks good. Thank you very much.
Excellent. And Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'd also like to thank staff for this innovative approach, which I am fully behind. I wanted to get a little bit more clarity of how we're defining neighborhoods and how you're going to actually assure that we get a representative group of citizens out. For example, in the Lake Trail, West Courtenay area, there might be half a dozen distinct neighborhoods. There might be Puntledge Park, the terminal area, several others, but would you be essentially collapsing an area like that into what you would call one neighborhood? Or how would you go about that?
Yeah, thanks. That's an excellent question. At this point, we're not looking at neighborhoods in the same sense that we currently have with local area plans. We're working more on the concept of where the growth is and greatest change is anticipated to be. And then in the other neighborhoods with what is often referred to as gentle infill, we don't feel the need for that same broad engagement. There will be opportunities through further workshops to discuss that a bit more. We're still refining, and I'll get Tats or Nancy to jump in if I'm wrong here, but still refining those neighborhoods, working with Leica Geospatial, who's one of the consulting teams involved in mapping out exactly what the extent of those growth nodes are. And then from there, we'll be able to further refine what we do for advertisement for the neighborhoods. A couple of areas that we're aware of is the delegation we had in Terminal Edition neighborhood, I guess late last year. Can't remember the exact date, but desire there to have consultation. And that's one where we may do an individual separate from the consultants discussion. The other one that's interesting is the broader Sandwick headquarters area. of town where there was a local area plan done when they came into the city. Things have changed since then in the city and infrastructure wise, and really wondering if that area should be focused on a little bit more in terms of engagement to get a bit more density from the refer to it as more a semi-rural character that exists in those neighborhoods today. So those are the two outside of the growth nodes where you see the major concentration of developments today that we're sort of contemplating. But we'll refine those in the coming month with the anticipated sort of late October getting out into the neighborhoods.
Thank you. That's great. I appreciate you remembering the presentation from the terminal neighborhood folks, and it sounds like overall a very good process. So thanks again.
And thanks. And I don't see any other further questions or comments. So based on that, I think we're ready to poll council. So starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor?
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
In favor.
And I'm in favor as well. And again, I think so far the OCP consultations, even by Zoom, were pretty have been pretty effective. So I just want to thank staff for moving ahead and really adapting and making sure this project continues on during some challenging times. And I think we're going to have a really good product at the end. So again, thanks very much. With that, we have OCP Amendment Bylaw 2996.
Mr. Mayor, I'm just wondering if, since staff have given us a couple of options on this, I'm wondering if we could have the staff presentation and questions before we actually go to the motion.
Yeah, that's fine. So I'll pass it over to staff if staff want to just speak to it, and then we'll that might help us deliberate and come up with a motion.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. With that, I'll turn this over to Matt Fitzgerald, our Manager of Development Planning, to summarize the report and answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you. Through the CAO to Mayor and Council. So proposed is an amendment to the city's OCP as well as zoning bylaw to first of all redesignate the property from its current state, which is industrial, to a multi-residential designation. And then the second component is to rezone it from current split zone. It's currently a single family zone as well as a light industrial zone to R4, which is a multi-family zone, with the intent being to facilitate a 137 unit multi-family development. Not to repeat too much what the applicant went into details on, I think there's a fairly comprehensive proposal, but the end result would be a mix of three components, which include a mix of apartment style units as well as townhome style units. There's also a traffic study completed in support of the application, which recommended no changes to the existing system and the ability for the system to handle the additional load caused by the development. I guess just to clarify a few things that came up in the delegation presentation, council had many questions on, I think, some of the more specific elements. And so looking forward, should this property be rezoned, there would be subsequent development permit processes, and I would expect probably at least 3 development permits to be applied for this property. And it's at this time that we would be looking in detail at things like potential tree retention, as well as things that are covered in zoning, like visitor parking, and also things, other elements mentioned, like waste disposal. That would be, again, something handled through the development permit process. So I think great comments, and I just highlight that there would be those additional processes coming after this that would look at those fine elements. Also, as detailed, the applicant did conduct a pre-application conducted a public information meeting before making an application, and I think a little bit unique. I haven't seen that in my time here, where the applicant went to community before making an application, and then helped use those results to shape the ultimate proposal, and then held the subsequent required public information meeting, with results provided in your council package. So staff are recommending that these bylaws are given first and second reading, and then that a public hearing is scheduled. That'll take any questions.
Excellent. We'll start with Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I'm actually quite impressed with the development. And on a side note, I'm really appreciating how staff bring these delegations in ahead of these discussions to help us get through all the points of them. So that's really great. I wanted to ask about the road design, the curb gutter bit that's going to be required from the developer. And I'm not 100% sure on what that street looks like in front of it. I think it right now has a separated bike lane, but am I right on that? And is that going to be maintained and in fact somehow improved, or how does that fit into it? Our cycling network plan interface with this property?
Yeah, thanks for the question through the CAO to Mayor and Council. So as part of the development, whether a building permit is applied for first or whether a subdivision was applied for first, either could come first. The owner would be required to upgrade all frontages to current municipal standards. So that would include things like curb and gutter, sidewalks, and then also improvements to the cycling infrastructure. So there is an existing facility in this location, and there would be modifications required as part of the bus stop, for example. The overall connectivity system would be maintained.
Yeah, and so just to clarify, the cycling network plan, does it what sort of infrastructure does it indicate on this frontage here? I know Trevor's been studying this all year for me, so he seems to know.
Mr. Mayor, maybe it's a perfect time I jump in here. So I can confirm that this is the section of the road, the VMP project in 2020 that was not paved, anticipating the potential development on this side of the road and of course on the west side of the road. To clarify, this is a painted buffered bike lane that will complete the section right to Waters and then back into the north end of Crown Isle. So this is the last remaining gap of the painted buffer bike lane. And I suspect that the engineer drawings will detail that for both the developments on both sides.
Sure, and currently we have that those separators on the rest of the VMP. Is there any way to make that section similar so that it has some sort of separation instead of just the buffered section?
Well, we certainly like to always have continuity. Council will see in the coming weeks a report on the pilot program of the delineators that were installed as part of the VMP project. We're having some issues, of course, with attrition, but I will say positively that lately, over the last 10 days, we haven't seen the attrition rate that we had when they originally were put up about 30 days ago. But that will really inform go forward design on this development.
Okay, thanks for that. Appreciate the answer.
Excellent. And Councillor McCollum.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to staff for this report. I found it very thorough, and as I went through it, many of the questions I had at the beginning were answered by the end. But two of the comments that we received from the public was concerning over enrollment or lack of capacity in the nearby elementary school. And I actually went and looked at the long range facilities plan for SD 71 that they did a couple of years back, and that school currently has, or assuming that the numbers are still roughly the same, capacity for another 100 students, or it was about 80% at the time. But it did make me wonder what the process is, or if there is any back and forth between the city and the school district when we're contemplating these medium to larger developments in a neighborhood where it's been previously single family, because this seems like a concern that's often raised when we receive these, and I'm just wondering what the obligations here of the city are in terms of the school district's ability to accommodate more families.
Yeah, thanks for the question through CAO to Mayor and Council. So we also had referenced or looked at that plan and saw that the enrollment wasn't wasn't near capacity yet. But in terms of our engagement with school district, we do meet quarterly with them and discuss upcoming projects and development applications are in process in the city, as well as the scale of those proposals. We did circulate this application to the school district. We don't have a response yet received for tonight.
And is that typical that we provide them with information and they do not typically provide feedback, or do we sometimes receive feedback that is positive, like this is a good area or these schools don't have any more room? Or is it more an exchange of information without so much, the school district really weighing in on it one way or the other?
Thanks for the question. I think my understanding is that most of the developments, I mean, this would be a larger, in terms of units, development that we see, but most developments we do see are much smaller, or at least the council considers is much smaller, so it would have much less impact on enrollment numbers. But again, those would be discussed at the quarterly meetings, and at that time, if there was additional information needed, we could provide.
Great. Okay. Thanks for that.
Excellent. And Councillor Moore.
Sorry, my mute was not coming off. Yeah, I mean, basically just repeating somewhat what I said earlier. I'm really happy with how there's been response to some of the concerns. I was happy to hear the traffic study being explained and clarified, which was one of the main concerns that was brought forward by surrounding residents. Of course, there were the concerns that we often hear about bringing property values down because of bringing rental housing in. And I think that there's no evidence of that in terms of bringing property values down with bringing rental housing in. And as I mentioned, I think that this mix is exactly what we need to create connection and community, and frankly, to get more people in homes, because we have a lot of folks who are, families that have 2 or 3 kids squeezed into a 1-bedroom or whatever. And this is the way that we're going to help address those housing needs that we have. And again, I'm really happy to see BC Housing partnering here. And as we know, the city doesn't have a lot of leeway in terms of helping with some of the housing needs or the supply. So we do need to, we do need developers to step up and have these partnerships. So I think overall it's a good news story. And I think, unfortunately, when we move into a neighborhood and into a single family home, if there's empty space all around us, I think we have to realize that at some point there's going to be something beside us, especially if it's in more of an expansion area. So while I understand that change is difficult, I do think that this is going to be a positive addition to the neighborhood and that many of the concerns have been addressed. Thanks.
All right, and Councillor Theos.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm wondering in regards to not only this project, which could house on its own between 300 to 500 people when it's completed, but the other projects in the area additional to this project, including the Crown Isle potential proposals that are in combined, looking at housing possibly over 1,000 people in a very short time period. My question's in regard to the sewer system capacity, even though we've had the Greenwood Trunk and Hudson moving forward, which is fantastic news, much needed obviously for these projects to even move forward. But how much more capacity are we going to have as in terms of sewer after we see the fruition of these projects. Thank you.
And maybe I'll jump into that and let Trevor, interim CAO, jump in if necessary. So with the Greenwood trunk under construction and upon its completion, it should solve almost all of the sanitary questions that we have. It's a large capacity supply, allows us to divert a lot of the flows that currently go down sort of behind Superstore area and over to the lift station on Comox Road. So I'm confident in that. It's all designed based on growth scenarios that that staff provide. We do at the same time require with every development of any significance for them to do modeling. And the city actually undertakes those models based on the unit counts that are provided. And that looks at capacity for water, especially as it relates to fire flows, and then identifies what upgrades are necessary. Same is done for sanitary sewer. So it's piggybacking on our models and trying to determine, is that capacity there? If not, what upgrades are required? But with the Hudson trunk that you alluded to and directing a lot of Crown Isles flows in that direction, and then completion of the Greenwood later this year into next year, those issues should all be resolved and sanitary sewer won't be a concern.
Thanks, Ian. That's great.
All right, and Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. I wonder if staff could provide, first of all, could provide some details regarding the covenant that's recommended to be registered on this property and what it would cover specifically.
Yeah, thanks for the question through CAO to Mayor and Council. So I guess just backing up, some of the larger developments the council has recently seen are comprehensive development zones. So that's a very specific zone designed to meet a very specific detailed design. In this case, the developer has not gone for that level of detail as I highlighted before. And you know, while they've explored and have some detail on things like waste disposal, the final designs are really yet to come. And so 3 areas or 4 areas that were identified if this rezoning is to be granted would be, first of all, to maintain the siting and height of the buildings adjacent to the single family residential on Cascara. And the reason for that is really a reflection of the concerns the neighbors had in that, for example, should the zoning be given and there were no controls, a developer could come in and propose a 4-story building. So one of the controls is that the townhomes would be maintained at 2 stories, and the other control is that the 37-unit apartment building would set back at a distance which is far greater than the setback would otherwise require. The other elements of the covenant recommended would be the preservation of the larger tree stand in the north corner of the site, as well as the construction of the pathway or improvements to the pathway on the north property line.
Thanks very much. So essentially, both the amenities that the site provides, tree retention and the pathways, and then setbacks and height requirements that are going to preserve those, I don't know about views, but privacy for the people in Cascara. Appreciate that. My second question relates to the public notice that was provided and the feedback that was received. It's indicated in the report that letters went out to 288 households. Is that correct?
Thanks for the question. That is correct. So in this case, it's circulated to a 100-meter radius, and that happens to hit. I don't recall the name of the community offhand. It's just across Veterans, but it's a large strata community, and so it hits part of the common property, and as a result, all the property owners have a common interest and all received that notice. So that's why the number is so high.
Okay, but we only received 24 letters in response, And I don't know what, I'd appreciate knowing if you consider whether that's a good response, or are we surprised there was so few?
I think given that most of those were as part of that community I referenced, I think they would see they don't, or they may not have an impact or have anything to add to the development given its proximity to their homes. So I think the number received are what I'd expect.
Okay, and if this passes and we go ahead with a public hearing, how soon would you anticipate that would happen, given that we've yet to hold a public hearing in COVID times? And I know that you've indicated staff are working on that. I'm just wondering where we're at with that.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So again, my understanding is that hearings will resume again in October, and I don't know if other staff have more to add to that. But, we have a backlog right now of 3 applications waiting for public hearing. It's less than you'd expect, and that's primarily the result of the waiving of public hearings in certain instances. And then should this application be given first and second reading tonight, that would be the 4th public hearing.
Okay, and I have one more question, but it looks like Mr. Kushner wants to jump in.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll just clarify that staff right now are working on a proposed report to come to council with respect to having offsite council meetings and public hearings. That report is anticipated early October, and then with potentially by mid-October having public hearings.
Okay, thanks very much. So my final question relates to the section of the report that talks about the official community plan. And you've indicated that staff were planning to engage this neighborhood later this year to get their input regarding the official community plan. You've given us an option to defer this application until after that input's been gained. I just wonder if staff could speak to your thinking behind that process, because although you've given us that option, you've recommended that we pass this prior to that engagement. And I'm just wondering about the costs and benefits associated with those 2 options.
Thanks for the question through CAO to Mayor and Council. So I guess as the previous item on the agenda highlighted, the staff will be going to the community, and this will be one of the areas that will be engaged regarding the future development in the immediate area. I guess it's more of a coincidence that this application and the OCP or the OCP process kind of converged at this point, but because consultation is imminent, we did include it as an option for council. However, given the level of consultation the developer undertook, as well as just where this application is at in the process, we recommended meeting at public hearing. And then in terms of the, I guess the costs and benefits, from the developer's perspective, it would add more time to the approval process and potentially jeopardize the project.
Thanks. I'll ask a follow-up if you don't mind. I'm wondering if there's any possibility of fast-tracking a walkabout in this neighborhood so that some consultation actually could take place as we potentially move towards a public hearing.
Yeah, I can, sorry, Matt, I'll jump in here. I can answer that. To be honest, I'd have to check with staff. I think it would be difficult though. We're still finalizing those details in those areas and then what that would look like. I'll just add as well, the other sort of rationale behind that suggestion is that there is a local area plan in the area. A couple of the submissions from the public have alluded to that plan. From staff's perspective, at least from mine in reviewing background material of that plan and where we're at today, the area has had a number of changes over time to what that plan that goes back to 1995 contemplated, including the industrial designation on this property. So we do feel that, as Mr. Fitzgerald said, moving forward is appropriate at this time. But we just do see that alignment with the OCP and wanted to provide that option for council. We can check and get back to council on the timing of that. I see we've lost both Tats and Nancy, who could better provide the details because they're working on a daily basis with the consultant. But I think it would be tough to do that in a short turnaround.
Okay, it does strike me that if we're not considering measures for public hearings until October, we've probably got a couple ahead of this one in the queue. We'd probably be looking at November, December before we had a public hearing in relation to this. So, I mean, from my perspective, ideally, we could provide some consultation for the neighborhood, but I'd be interested to hear what other councillors think about that. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Thanks. And Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to I spent some time reviewing the different responses that were provided in relation to this development, and it was great to see that a number of them had been resolved by the redesign and replanning of the site. I think the concern that people had about being overlooked or about a 3-story building being close to their property line was well resolved. There were also some concerns about increases in traffic, and I think the addition of a second entrance exit on VMP has helped to ease that. And then traffic study seems to indicate that there is more than adequate capacity on the roads there, and also that the developers have planned it so that we've got options in terms of other forms of transportation beyond driving. So traffic concerns being managed through demand with better storage for bikes. The fact there are 3 bus routes which come right to that very corner and 6 within a 10-minute walk. And one of the points that hasn't been discussed, which I thought was quite interesting, came up on page, was it 143, and that was just the use of existing infrastructure. And this is a development which brings 137 units, yet requires no additional city infrastructure. And I think for anyone who's interested in seeing taxes kept at a reasonable level, this is a really important factor. If you're trying to add 137 new units of traditional single-family residential, the city would inherit an awful lot of infrastructure with that and would need to maintain it over many years. And with this, there are no additional infrastructure requirements. And I believe the report says, should any capacity constraints exist within the existing area, that the developer would need to upsize them at their own cost. So I think the development seems to be positive in many, many ways, including the fact that it's going to contribute to the city's tax base without substantially increasing at all the cost of maintaining our infrastructure. And if we want to maintain a thriving city with reasonable tax levels, that's something that which we definitely need to take into consideration. And in terms of the question that Councillor Hillian raised about engagement, it would be ideal to arrange some sort of walking tour in the immediate short term. But I'd be guided by Mr. Buck and his staff as to whether that's a realistic prospect. But certainly, if it were possible, that would be ideal. Thanks.
All right. Excellent. And Councillor Frisch.
You know what? I was just going to move the motion, but I saw another. Oh, the hand went up and down. Okay. Is that okay, Mr. Mayor, if I move the motion or the recommendation?
Yeah, Councillor McCollum, I think it was your hand that did you take down?
I was going to do the same. I was ready to move the motion.
There we go. Let's make it happen.
Okay, right. So I'll move that council give first and second reading of the OCP amendment bylaw number 2996 to redesignate the subject property from industrial to multi-residential. The council give first and second reading of zoning amendment bylaw number 2997 to rezone the subject property from R1B and I2 to R4. That council directs staff to schedule and advertise a statutory public hearing with respect to the above referenced bylaws following the resumption of regular council meetings or upon approval of an alternative process and that final reading of the bylaws be withheld pending the registration of a Section 219 covenant on the subject property.
Second.
All right, and I do see that Councillor Hillian, you do have your hand up.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm going to vote in favor of the motion, but I would appreciate it if staff could explore the possibility of the neighborhood consultation related to the official community plan taking place sooner rather than later. And I think the rationale for that is that, as Mr. Buck said, there previously was a local area plan for this area. Substantial changes have taken place. This is another substantial change, which some people are feeling challenged by. And while I appreciate that it may not be able to happen in as timely a manner as we would like, I think if it could, it would be an indication of goodwill on the city's part, and it might bring further community engagement and understanding to a project like this, if it does in fact go ahead.
All right, thanks for that. Mr. Kushner.
Thanks, Mayor. With that, we can I can certainly have a discussion with Mr. Buck and his group, and we can report back to council on that possibility.
Okay. With that, I'll poll council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
I'm in support.
And I'm in favor as well. Excellent. Thanks for that very fulsome discussion we had tonight on this development. Really appreciate all the good questions. Next we have the Comox Valley Regional District referral regarding 3L developments.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that council direct staff to respond to the attached referral, recommending that the bylaws be rejected as they are inconsistent with the regional growth strategy.
Second that.
Excellent. Okay. Does staff want to speak to this at all?
Thank you, Mayor. With that, I'll pass this to Mr. Ian Buck, our Director of Development Services, to summarize the report and answer any questions that council may have.
Yeah, thanks very much. The information that's necessary is all attached within the agenda. We've included the full referral package from the regional district. What we've been referred is OCP and zoning amendment for a modified version of the 3L development from the proposal that was rejected, I believe it was 2018, through the amendment to the regional growth strategy. Since that time, they've modified slightly the proposal, reducing it from 780 units, down to 780 units from 1,100. The interesting thing and what staff struggled a little bit with on this one is it's just an OCP and zoning amendment, not an RGS amendment. And since they are inconsistent with the goals of the RGS and the designations of the property, staff are recommending that it be rejected. And I'll take any questions.
All right, thanks very much, and thanks for the explanation. Do any councillors have any questions? I know Councillor Morin, this was something that you had brought forward, but are you happy with the way it's played out?
Yeah, the reason I brought it forward was because all the communities locally were kind of doing something different with this process, and it was a bit confusing. So yeah, I just wanted a bit of clarification on the process, actually. And it sounds like it could have been just dealt with at the staff level, but other councils dealt with it in a different way. So yeah, that's why I brought it forward. Thanks.
All right. And Mr. Buck, did you want to respond?
Yeah, just very briefly, we get regular referrals from the regional district. Most of them are related to developments within the settlement expansion areas, which are those areas on the fringe of the municipality that are designated to one day come into the city after we intensify the municipal areas. those referrals are always dealt with at a staff level. They're often just variances for garages or setbacks, that sort of thing. In this instance, staff had intended to just respond at a staff level because it was a fairly straightforward request. It would be different had it been a regional growth strategy amendment. We may come forward in the future with a policy around these referrals. It's kind of hard to say what triggers the need for council involvement. But you did see in the media that Cumberland took it to council. Comox just responded through the CAO. We can adjust as needed, but that's sort of how the process has worked. No formal, I guess, policy around that. And you're right, everybody does do it differently.
Well, I appreciate the work on it, and I certainly didn't intend for it to become more work for people. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Councillor Morin. All right, with that, let's poll council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor?
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
Favor.
And I'm in favor as well. Thanks, Seth, for bringing that back to us. And next we have internal reports and correspondence, which we can receive all at once if somebody wants to do that. And then we'll maybe speak to it a little bit.
Move receipt. Second.
All right. So that receives everything from 6.1 to 6.5. I do just want to thank staff who really had to beetle around and get these briefing notes sorted out in very little time. The turnaround time was quite crazy by the time we got the actual confirmation of the meetings, and then obviously doing this while they're doing their regular jobs. And I think a special shout out to Angio, who is really done a great, fantastic job articulating some of our thoughts into a briefing note so that we could have these conversations. And I'll just speak to 6.1 and 6.2, which was Ministry and Minister of Finance, and basically sort of went to them with some of the similar requests that we had last year, and part of that being that really on behalf of all municipalities to look at getting a share of the property transfer tax that could basically go directly to municipalities and then be really allocated for things that, whether that be social services or affordable housing. The provincial sales tax, like they do in Saskatchewan, getting a portion of that, which hopefully could go towards things like solid waste and organics programs, which cost far more than the tipping fees that we collect. And of course, there's a liquor tax as well. And again, we already know what those revenues are for these three taxes. Last year, the response that we got back, even though we said we weren't really interested in the cannabis tax because there's no proven revenue, they said that they're very excited by it. And I believe it was Councillor Cole-Hamilton that commented, I guess it takes government to lose money selling cannabis or something like that, because it doesn't look like they've made that much off the cannabis tax just yet. And so, one of the other taxes that we've talked about in the past is a gas tax, local gas tax, which we were told to follow up on, but that looks like it's not in the cards either. So, and probably just as for those that are watching, just to be aware that with all the casinos closing across the province, to our local government budget, that's going to actually reduce our budget by about $700,000 in revenue that we normally would have gotten. So like a lot of municipalities, our staff are really trying to get our ducks in a row to move forward, but just making sure that the ministers are aware of this. However, at the same time, they are making announcements, I think, almost literally while we were speaking, probably something to do with the election announcement. So, we'll continue pushing on these shares of revenue as the property taxes being our only source of revenue can be challenging to keep up with the demand, especially as some of the services are downloaded to us. With that, I'll pass it off to, I think, Councillor Hillian who's going to speak on municipal affairs and housing.
Thank you, Mayor. We did have an opportunity to meet by phone with Minister Robinson, who is the minister responsible for municipal affairs and housing, along with BC Housing representatives. And we presented the challenges that we're having with both affordable and supportive housing in the community. We asked that the province provide more of those and also that they mandate outreach services and skilled staff as components of any housing developments that are built, which relates to the junction presentation that we heard earlier tonight. We also requested a framework for affordable and co-op housing initiatives at the municipal level. And I think what we stressed to the minister is that while we have stepped forward and provided land in a couple of cases, our ability to do that is limited, and we really need the senior governments to step up and take the lead in this regard. We stress the challenges that we've had in relation to both homelessness and campsites that have sprung up, the challenges that our staff have in responding to bylaw concerns, the policing issues that come up. We referenced the housing assessment that's just recently been done by the regional district and the lack of both low-income supportive housing as well as middle-income housing. And we also referenced the homeless count that has taken place. And I think in response, the minister certainly encouraged us to continue to work with BC Housing. She indicated that the initiatives they have for funding are ongoing. And I believe we will be meeting with BC Housing officials in the near future to explore the possibilities for further work in this regard. Well, I think that perhaps sums it up, unless other council members want to add something.
I do see Councillor Theos has his hand up.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to go back to your report about the minister meeting with financial minister. I just wanted to ask now. The timing is obviously makes really little sense as in terms of what commitments can actually even have been committed to us. These were the same questions in regards to funding our needs moving forward as were asked last year. But this year, the circumstances is a finance minister that's not even looking to continue in the portfolio for much longer. Did we have any indication of, or did you have any indication of a potential new finance minister going to move forward in the next few weeks or so? Obviously, with an election being called, they're going to have to replace this finance minister, but maybe talk to somebody that's actually going to be holding the portfolio moving forward and can actually do something?
Well, at both of these meetings, and again, obviously the one at the ministry that was with the Ministry of Finance, because the minister wasn't at that meeting, we did speak to senior staff. So usually with an election, I believe senior staff generally stay with the ministries they're in. There obviously is movement, and some of the folks that we spoke to had been at different ministries, but really, we're going to keep pushing. As we know, as a municipality, we get about 7 cents on the tax dollar. The rest goes to the province and the federal government, and that creates a huge challenge when we are then asked to provide more and more services locally. And just from that sustainable model, it's very difficult when our main lever is those property taxes. So, again, we really focus in on the property transfer tax, which was brought in and goes to general revenue, the provincial sales tax, which I think really links up with the solid waste issue that we have, the cost of solid waste and managing that, and of course, the liquor tax. I think, given the fact that all 3 of those taxes have a really well known track record in terms of revenues generated, and even if we look at how things are going to play out during the pandemic, there may be a reduction a little bit on the gas taxes that we receive. But at the same time, the amount of revenue on liquor taxes has gone up significantly for the government. So to say, here's an area where maybe we can share in this. Again, as you can imagine, a lot of pressures from the government right now, and not really appropriate for us to get too far into election issues right now. I think we'll certainly be talking about it a lot, but right now it is really I think best for our staff to be in regular communications. And I think they've done an excellent job of not just garnering grants, but looking for new grants. And if we get ideas for grants, we pass that along to staff so that they can look at that. Because at this point in time, that's really where things are going to be. But as a voter, you can certainly ask the question of any of the incumbents or folks that are running for what they might promise. So given the fact that it is an election, but yeah, Councillor Hillian, did you want to respond as well?
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to note that the province did announce 1.5 billion in funding, which included components for communities as well as small business. And I'm assuming that goes ahead regardless of the current situation. And I believe we've also heard some federal announcements in the last day or so regarding aid packages that are coming out to communities. So we'll have to see what the specifics are, but I look forward to us recouping some of the losses that we've sustained during this time with that federal and provincial help.
Yeah, and with that, as well as when we were talking to Minister Robinson for housing, I mean, we did point out the fact that as a council early on in the pandemic, in fact, within days of the pandemic starting here in the Valley, our council did step up and go to the Homelessness Coalition, ask them how much money they needed to operate with their funding and donations basically stopping, and we were able to turn around and give them exactly what they asked for within basically a day or so of them requesting it. So that's something where as a council we stepped up, and as a municipality we stepped up to make sure things like the food bank, et cetera, could continue to operate. And so as Councillor Hillian has said, I mean, what we're looking at now is, how can those things come back and give us the opportunity to recuperate some of those costs that we incurred. With that, next on here was Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, and just kind of talking about capital stuff, and Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. That was a great meeting last Tuesday with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. And as the briefing note outlines, there were a few points. I mean, there's 4 on here, but I think we added in a couple as well. Number 1, we talked about the Highway 19A bypass road improvements, and that's along Farquharson Farms, and the ministry's plan to make that into a 4-lane. And we've heard about their plans before and how they could possibly involve a multi-use path alongside of it, and help us deal with some of our flooding issues in that Puntledge area. So we highlighted that we're indeed interested in seeing that happen, and also timing-wise, we wanted to stress that, of course, it wouldn't happen at the same time as our 5th Street Bridge, which I think they assured us wouldn't be the case. We also talked about the Ryan Road Hill sidewalk improvements, and it was agreed that that would be a very expensive project. So I think we still have to keep our thinking caps on to figure out how to resolve that. Number 3 is more about the bypass and council's interest in seeing us work with them on the road, the widening of the Farquharson Farm bypass there, and allowing us to potentially realize an east-west connector. So we're hoping to have future dialogue with them and make sure that we're all on the same page. And number 4 is the pedestrian crossing, which we've kind of brought to the table as something new on Cliff Avenue between 19th and 26th. It was noted that there's lots of developments going in there, and that we don't have proper pedestrian and cycling infrastructure. There's no easy way to cross the road there, which is, it does seem a little silly. And so they agreed that they'd like to hear about our ideas and talk about that more and see what is a good way to move pedestrians. One thing they did note is that they seem to have money for renewal projects and alternative transportation projects more so than just adding capacity like road widenings and such, although we seem to be getting both, so that's nice. So the last thing I think we added on was following up on our interest on Ryan Road at the top near Cowichan, the crossing at North Island College. And indeed, they are, I believe, working on that, and will follow up with us on what the results of all their studies and design works are and how we can get people between Cowichan Avenue and North Island College across Ryan Road safely. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Did anybody have anything else they wanted to add to that particular section? Again, I think it was great as an update, and what we're going to have happen is bring them back for further discussion with council so that we can kind of have a more substantial conversation. A lot of these ministry meetings are similar to speed dating. They're very quick, 15, 20 minutes sometimes. And so, having that follow-up meeting, I think will give us an opportunity to kind of delve into it. And I believe one of the other things is getting them to provide some feedback for our OCP program, project, I should say, so that, they're fully aware of what our plans are and can give that feedback as well. So thanks, Councillor Frisch, on that. And lastly, we have the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, and I'll pass it over to Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And in that conversation, we had a couple of different topics on the agenda. One of them was to speak to the Assistant Deputy Minister about our OCP, and they were fully supportive, obviously, of the climate lens we're putting on it and willing to assist in any way that they could. The second topic that came up was single-use plastics. And I think the province has been in a couple of different places on that. They obviously fought the City of Victoria's bylaw. More recently, they've started giving permission to various bylaws, and we wanted to find out from them whether it made sense to try and seek permission to reinstate the one that we put together, or whether there was going to be forthcoming some sort of broader provincial framework. And there seemed to be agreement on both sides, from us and from them, that having a patchwork of different bylaws in different communities was not useful to the public. It wasn't useful to business. It was not an ideal way of solving that problem. And the indication we got is that there were regulations being drafted for a province-wide framework, and that there'll be follow-up between the gentleman we're speaking to. That ADM was not the expert on that field, and he was going to have one of his colleagues speak with our staff and let them know how that kind of standard is developing. And the third subject was something that came up because it was actually to be announced that day. And that's kind of some really good news on energy efficiency retrofits. And close to a third of all the emissions in British Columbia, it's 32.4% of the emissions in the province come from buildings. And having more energy efficient buildings is just a win for everyone. You got lower fuel bills, you get less greenhouse gases, and the work to do to make those changes obviously produces good employment in our communities. And what the announcement that was made was something called PACE, which is Property Assessed Clean Energy, which is it's a financing tool that allows property owners, both commercial and residential, to borrow money to undertake a broad range of clean energy improvements on their buildings. And then that's paid back over a long period of time, usually up to 20 years on the tax bill. And you can just use the savings, the money you're saving on the efficiency, to pay back on your tax bill each year. And the good news is that there's going to be a $2 million pilot program in British Columbia. It's a small pilot, but it's the first time. Many years have been spent trying to move PACE towards the goal line. And this is the first time we've seen a government in power working to put that to the test and try it out in the field. And we had a good discussion about whether that was best done with a single piece of enabling legislation, which provide a single standard province-wide, make it easy for local governments to just opt in, or whether it should be a system of having to build it yourself for each government. And there seemed to be some agreement there that it was wise to have a single standard. As it happens, I've been working with a group called PACE BC, which has been advocating, having meetings with ministers and others to develop exactly that single piece of enabling legislation, which would allow communities across the province to adopt PACE. And anyway, I'm going to follow up with the Assistant Deputy Minister with the draft legislation, and I also pitch that maybe Courtenay might be a good community for them to invest that $2 million for a pilot program, and there seemed to be some interest in that as well. So it's a very productive meeting, and we'll be following up, and hopefully it'll take us somewhere useful. Thanks.
Excellent. And I just want to thank all the councillors that participated in these meetings. I think they were really fruitful. Councillor Cole Hamilton, I think, got a special shout out for basically knowing as much or more than the folks that we were talking to in regards to some of these programs that you just spoke of. And I think that just speaks to the things that our councillors do on the behalf of folks. So I just want to really thank you guys for taking the time, extra time out of your days to really participate in these meetings. Mr. Kushner, did you want to add something?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank staff, in particular, Ann Gio, Rayanne Matthews, and Wendy Sarista, who behind the scenes performed yeoman-like work to produce those briefing notes in short order in what is and what continues to be a very unique virtual UBCM. So just a big shout out to them. Thank you very much.
Yeah, love to echo that. Absolutely, and again, I think it was again a bit of Herculean efforts to get things done in such a short order with lots of balls in the air, yeah, so I really want to appreciate everybody that made that happen. With that, again, it is just a report for receipt, so I'll just assume that everybody is in support of that, and we'll move into reports and updates from council, and we'll start with Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Nothing to report beyond. I think the meetings we did last week were a real highlight of what's happened since we last spoke. Thanks.
Fair enough. And I had yes next to your name, but then you spoke to it what you were going to talk about. So again, thanks a lot for that. And then we had Councillor Morin. You wanted to speak.
Sorry about my mute is taking longer. Thank you. I did just want to, I know this is a long meeting, but I wanted to talk on just a couple things. I did attend the Overdose Awareness Day event, and I just wanted to kind of keep this issue in the limelight in terms of we do have another major health crisis going on parallel to the COVID crisis, and we have lost many people due to the toxic drug supply. So that event was organized by the Art Gallery, and they do have a project coming up. They've been working with a lot of folks with lived experience, and so stay tuned for that event coming up, which is really to kind of break down stigma and help our community understand the impact of this on folks. And Councillor Cole Hamilton and I have been sitting on the drug strategy committee's process for a regional drug policy. So that's another thing that's kind of happening in parallel to some of this other awareness. So I just want to keep that on our radar, that we are, as a community, trying to respond to that crisis and keep those people in our hearts that have been impacted. The other thing I wanted to mention is Councillor Cole Hamilton and I attended an event, excuse me, that was organized by the Cumberland Community Forest Society, as well as the McLaughlin Gardens, which is a kind of a writers in residence program. And it was called Creative Differences, Art, Adaptation, and the Reinvention of the World. And it was a reading by Marcus Youssef, who actually had penned one of the one of the pieces that we used at the Climate Action Theatre event last year. And what was interesting about this event was it was really looking at how we're adapting to COVID in terms of public assembly, climate change, all kinds of adaptation that's going on. I'm just really impressed with how the community is being creative in terms of trying to find a way to still have public assembly, and we had it done at Puntledge Park. It was great. It was really well organized with the COVID protocols. And I was reminded of that event when I went to the SID Theatre the other night for the Youth Media Project screening. And I wanted to do a shout out to our staff at the SID, who were just amazing, just so organized. This was the very first event that's taken place in that theater since the onset of COVID, and it was really well done. And I know that the SID is taking part in the Day of Visibility campaign. So tomorrow night, they're going to be turning their red lights on, and that's in solidarity for all the performance venues that are being impacted by COVID, and the many groups that we're not able to see right now. So I just wanted to kind of point out those two things, and to recognize that our arts community, particularly the performing arts, is really impacted, and to kind of do a shout out to folks who are being very creative and trying to find ways for us still to gather and celebrate the arts. So thanks for that.
All right, thanks very much. Councillor Theos.
No, thanks. I changed the mind in that regard. Thank you very much for asking. I'll update in 2 weeks.
Okay, that sounds fair. And
thank you very much.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah, just quickly, I just wanted to comment on one issue that a constituent brought to my attention. I do get the odd referral, and I have the Meet the Mayor times, and I did meet with one person that was concerned about some of the flight patterns and frequency and times of flight from the local air park. I took those concerns to the air park, who responded very quickly and swiftly, made sure that those that were acting outside of regulations were educated on the proper rules, and they really, I think, stepped up to make sure that things that might have been with folks doing things out of compliance, that would then be sort of irritating local residents of Courtenay. Yeah, so it was great to see that there was that quick response. With that, we can move into resolutions of council.
Mayor, I'll move that special in-camera meeting closed to the public will be held September 21st, 2020 at the conclusion of the regular council meeting, pursuant to the following subsections of the community charter: 91C, labor relations or other employee relations, and 91E, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements if the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality.
Second.
Excellent, thanks for that. I'll poll council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor?
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCullum.
In favor.
Councillor Moran.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
I'm in favor.
And I'm in favor as well. Excellent. Under new business, we do have the Comox Valley Farmers Market request for support.
I'll move receipt of this.
Second.
All right, and I'll pass it over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor. I would recommend that a staff report, a quick turnaround staff report, is in order, but with your will, maybe I will pass this to Mr. Snyder, our Director of Rec and Culture, who can give a little context and background in regards to the discussions with this group and their proposal.
All right.
Thank you to the CEO, to Mayor and Council. Yeah, a staff report is going to be necessary. There's quite a bit of information and suggestions in the letter that would need to be addressed and pursued. A few key notes for council going into this. Any facility, it'll be challenging for any facility to be large enough during COVID times, especially for indoor use and tent support. Expansion of the existing booking will always tend to displace other users. And so that's something that council will need to count as well. And then with the large tent idea, as I mentioned in a prior council meeting, would require some engineering to ensure that it can be stable during high winds and the winter storms that we get, as well as the impacts on traffic and parking, and consultation with other groups like the Legion, the Business Improvement Association, and Sid Williams Theatre to look at the implications to those operations as well. So there's quite a bit of work that'll need to go into it, but we would try our best to turn this around as quickly as possible, knowing the timeline that they have. I'll take any questions if necessary.
All right, thanks. And we do have a few questions, starting with Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks to Trevor and Dave for the quick off-the-cuff report, which I'm sure you could use more time to think about. So I had the pleasure of talking to Ms. Skinner last week, and I encouraged her to send this letter in because of, just like she outlined, some challenges that they're facing. I see this as, obviously it's a private enterprise, but it also is in our wheelhouse in that it affects our food security here in the Valley. And if there's one question I have for staff, are they aware of if this organization falls in a different category than your average organizer? I mean, they are like a grocery store, and I know they've been by the province acknowledged as a necessary service.
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's I am aware that they are an essential service that was identified early on in COVID, and so they've been operating since the start of COVID. There's the category only extends so far. I think is the challenge, that all of the other ministerial orders still apply, and so limit of 50, which they've been working with down at the exhibition grounds and been quite diligent. But that gets a lot more challenging when we start to talk about indoor space and we talk about weather protection. So yeah, it definitely applies. And another example is access to washrooms. With indoor spaces, that is a lot more challenging than it is with outdoor spaces. So there may be a need for porta potties and different things like that. So yeah, we'll have to work this through to see what the possibilities are.
Fair enough, and I appreciate your willingness to do that. I was going to ask council to direct staff to work with this organization to find a solution, but hearing that you guys would be able to do a quick turnaround on a report might be wiser, and I certainly could settle for that and possibly get some more information. There are a lot of options that have been outlined, and so I think from their side they're very open-minded and willing to do what it takes to keep their services running, which I think is really important, especially for our downtown, which definitely use the traffic even as we move through this pandemic. So thank you very much.
And Councillor McCollum.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, and thanks to staff for giving us some information in advance of requesting a staff report. At this point, I'm curious what the initial thought is as to whether finding indoor space or maybe split up space inside is more feasible or less feasible than the suggestion of closing a parking lot. Thinking about the current use of, last season's use of Native Sons Hall versus the conference center, I'm just wondering if that were set up, whether or not that would really equate to a significant difference in how many people are able to come into the space, or if that's better off to wait for an answer in the staff report.
I think you'll get a better answer on the staff report, but I can take a crack at it now. Knowing that Upper Native Sons Hall and Lower Native Sons Hall are not very well connected. They are separate, and using that as an example, that was one of the suggestions in the letter, and it's probably the most likely solution. That site may function as separate sites, it's difficult. We have to take a look at the interpretation of the guidelines that have come out of the ministerial order to see whether what the limitation of 50 applies to when it starts to break into a number of different spots. Essentially, everyone assembling for one purpose is the regulation and what the detail in the ministerial order. So there's a lot to look into on that to try to determine how they would operate as an upper facility, a lower facility, whether the conference hall is included in that or not. If it's limited to 50, and even if it's spread out quite far, it still may be a challenging business plan for them to pull together, and then all the more challenging safety plan.
Fair enough. Okay, thanks for that.
And Councillor Morin.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I mean, I want to acknowledge that Mr. Snyder and his staff have probably been impacted more than many other departments in terms of recreation services and facilities and, you know, trying to make it all work and losing revenue, et cetera. So I appreciate all the work there. I know that we are going to receive some more requests for space, and particularly around food security. You know, we're sort of bracing ourselves for perhaps another wave of COVID in the winter, where our food security may be impacted as it was earlier on if things need to start closing down again or restrictions happen. So I think it is an area that it's good that we're taking a look at it. And as I say, there's probably more requests coming. When I was downtown the other night attending at the SID, I did notice the parking lot was virtually empty, which I thought was very surprising. I'm not used to seeing that parking lot empty. I know the hours. I mean, I'm not saying the parking lot is a solution because of all the things that Mr. Snyder's already mentioned, but it does. The market is sort of all put to bed, I guess you'd say, mid-afternoon or early afternoon. So it does allow for, you know, it wouldn't take up parking all day. So anyway, I appreciate that staff is going to look into it, considering I know there are a lot of pressures on you. Thank you.
And I don't see any further questions or comments. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, just quick question. You had mentioned a quick turnaround. What are you thinking on that? Is that like I mean, I guess we have a meeting. Well, we have a meeting for the next 2 weeks. Does it take a month to do this? I know they're looking for a place in a month or two. So what are your thoughts on that?
Excuse me. Yes. Thank you for the question. We would try to get something back to council in the start of October. So it gives us a couple weeks to pull that together. The reality is we have some lead time to get it to CAO for approval. So if not the first meeting in October, it'd be the next meeting after that.
Wonderful. Okay. Thanks.
And what we, sorry, Councillor Frisch, one other thing that we may consider if solutions are abundant and we are able to move forward quickly, then perhaps we may just send a briefing note to council to say it's been resolved. So that might be another option you may see.
All right. Well, thanks for all the help.
All right. And I'm not sure if we moved anything for receipt or anything on that, but again, I think yeah.
Well, we did, but if you wanted to dispense with it, I'm sure we could move on to a motion if you like.
Yeah. I'll just assume full unanimous support on receipt. And if you'd like to move a motion, Councillor Frisch.
Yep, thanks. I'd move that staff provide a report in response to the farmers market request for help during their winter market.
Seconded.
All right. And looking at staff, is there anything that would that you need in terms of guidance, or does that is that pretty much give you all the leeway you need?
No, we have our clarity, Mayor. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. I'll pull council, starting with Councillor Cole Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Frisch,
In favor.
Councillor Hillian,
In favor.
Councillor McCollum,
In favor.
Councillor Moran,
In favor.
Councillor Theos,
Favor.
and I'll vote in favor as well. Thanks very much for that. And that moves us into bylaws.
Mayor, I'll move that the official community plan amendment bylaw number 2996/2020, which for 2700 Mission Road, which is a bylaw to amend the official community plan bylaw number 2387/2005 to change the land use designation from industrial to multi-residential and amend map number 2 land use plan at 2700 Mission Road, pass first and second reading.
Second.
Excellent. And I'll pull council, starting with Councillor Cole Hamilton,
In favor.
Councillor Frisch,
In favor.
Councillor Hillian,
In favor.
Councillor McCollum,
In favor.
Councillor Moran,
In favor.
Councillor Theos,
I'm in favor.
and I'm in favor as well. Excellent. On to the next one.
Mayor, I'll move that zoning amendment bylaw number 2997/2020, 2700 Mission Road, a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw number 2500/2007 to rezone property from industrial 2 zone to residential 4 zone, and the schedule number 8 zoning map be amended accordingly for 2700 Mission Road, receive first and second reading.
Second.
Second.
Excellent. And I'll pull council on that, starting with Councillor Cole Hamilton,
In favor.
Councillor Frisch,
In favor.
Councillor Hillian,
In favor.
Councillor McCollum,
In favor.
Councillor Moran,
In favor.
Councillor Theos,
I'm in favor.
and I'm in favor as well. Excellent. That leaves one thing on the agenda.
Move adjournment.
Move adjournment. Second.
Excellent. I will assume adjournment is unanimous unless somebody waves their hands furiously. Otherwise, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Are we sticking with Zoom for the in camera?
We'll just wait till the video stops streaming. Seems to still be streaming.
Mhm.